if lambs are being creep fed around a creep feeder, if you can move that daily or every couple of days, whatever best suits, or even water trocks, if your water trock is movable where animals can congregate, these are all areas where they can spread this lameness bacteria, where the hoof can shed this lameness bacteria onto.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you less insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this episode, we're joined by Jake Delaney to explore some of the issues around scald and other lameness problems on farm and the wider impact on flock performance. Jake breaks down the causes and risk factors behind scald, why early intervention is essential, and treatment options in the key areas farmers need to monitor. We also take a look at other lameness conditions currently affecting sheep on farms and the importance of an accurate diagnosis and timely treatment. We hear now from Jake.
Look, lameness can have a big effect right across the board. Straight away, we think of lambs. We know lame lambs. Look, they're not going to, their growth rates are going to be impacted. They're not going to finish as fast. You're going to have them on the farm for longer. They're going to require more feed to finish, costing you more. We think about yos. Lame yos have suffered normally from a reduced body condition score. But if it's prolonged period of lameness, that can lead then to effects, say, on pregnancy scanning, right the way through then to the productivity of that young rearing or lamb. So then you can get into this very vicious cycle very quickly where lameness is having a big impact on your farm right the way through the season. So from yos to their ability to get in lamb, right way through to their ability to rear lambs, and then that has an impact on the lambs as well. So that's notwithstanding as well the massive welfare impact that lameness have. All lame sheep obviously are feeling some kind of pain, and that has a big impact on them as well. So control of lameness is a very important thing on farm.
And I take your point about the vicious cycle and awful that, so we can see if it gets out of hand early, it can generally become a problem right the way throughout the year. Look, I suppose, Jake, at the moment, the one type of lameness we're probably seeing emerging is scalded lambs over the last couple of weeks. Maybe just for our listeners, would you explain to me a little bit more about what scald is, kind of what we're looking at in lambs and how it occurs?
Yeah, no bother, Kieran. So scald, what causes scald is this tiny little bacteria that none of us can see called Delaney. And what that does is it gets into the hoof. Now, how it gets into the hoof is it needs some kind of nick, cut, bang, or something that causes a small bit of an abrasion. And through that, it goes in. And what it does is it causes infection. Look, anyone that's listening probably knows what scald looks like. But what it is this red inflammation between the digits, right in between. So you separate the toes right down there from the base of the foot up. You can see this inflammation. What it is, it's red, inflamed. A lot of the time there can be this kind of grey, yellowish pus coming out of the area as well. Look, anyone that knows it's a very nasty thing and can cause very severe lameness in lambs. It can spread right to all 4 feet of the lambs very easily, or it can spread very easily to the rest of the sheep in the flock.
I'm not going to say it's one of the lesser bacterial infections, but it's one we probably see has a more fast impact in terms of the pain we see in lambs. We see them yielding a lot quicker, and by the time you might see one or two with it, there could be a lot of lambs in that group showing the early signs of scald, Jake.
Yeah, exactly. The bacteria is in very high amounts in the foot when the scald occurs. So it's a right time for it as well to be spreading. So that sheep that has scald, often it's spreading that bacteria long before you see any signs. So right at the initial stage, when you start to see the couple of cases in scald in the flock first, normally that bacteria has spread its way right throughout the sheep, the lambs in this case, we'll say, and is just waiting to spark. So you can get actually an outbreak of scald quite rapidly. So that's why it's very important kind of to get in early when you see those first couple of cases and treat appropriately then.
And look at the conditions we have at the moment. Grass is starting to grow in that. It's all ideal for that microabrasion that you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of wet weather we've seen there in the last few weeks, combined then with the heat we're getting now. Look, the bacteria that causes scald kind of loves these days that are above 10 degrees in temperature. So that's when it can spread best. So anything like that lush grass that, as you said, that can cause that little microabrasion from at the base of the hoof from being in constant contact. If you have sheep that are being walked through wet kind of mucky gaps in the field, very simple things, or even on rough surfaces can cause all these things that can spark a lameness case or can let that bacteria take hold. So really it's about trying to minimize that. Look, in the case of lush pastures, there's not really much we can do about that, but in case the mucky gaps or whatever, trying to dry them out or whatever you can do. If we can try and reduce the opportunity where these sheep can pick up that bacteria, the more we can reduce that, the better chance we stand of stopping the spread. So, such as if lambs are being creep fed around a creep feeder, if you can move that daily or every couple of days, whatever best suits, or even water tracks if your water track is movable where animals can congregate. These are all areas where they can spread this lameness bacteria, where the hoof can shed this lameness bacteria onto.
Just to clarify that bacteria, how long will that last in the pasture? So the one thing that changes there is the conditions that gives the microabrasion, but that bacteria is fairly endemic on most sheep farms. Jake, how long does it last?
It can last forever if the cycle is allowed to continue. So it can typically last a couple of weeks in pasture, probably about 3 weeks in a field. But what can happen then if those sheep are constantly picking that up and depositing, then the bacteria can last for forever within the farm or on grass. And something we say that if you can try keep your sheep out of that field for 3 weeks or more, it can lessen the extent that bacteria it remains in the field.
We always have to bear in mind this could be just passing through the field to get to the yard or passing through the field to get to another one. There mightn't just necessarily have been a grazing. It's that monkey cap you mentioned. Look, we'll move on to treatment just for a minute. In terms of treating scald, Jake, how do we go about treating and how effective is it?
Yeah, look, Kieran, you have a few options, but probably the most effective option, as we've said already, scald can be in a high number, or the bacteria that causes it can be in a high number of lamb's feet, we'll say, before we even know about it. So a lot of the times you require something like a group treatment, and what offers that group treatment, if it's done properly, is foot batting. So foot batting, we talk about in this scenario, we'll talk about the use of zinc or copper sulfate solutions can be highly effective. But what they need to be effective is proper stand-in time. So ideally, when we're talking about copper or zinc sulfate, we're talking about a stand-in time of 15 to 20 minutes. They also need the solution to be made up to the right concentration. So about 10% we talk about there. And as well, they need a hard, dry kind of standing area afterwards. So when they come out of that foot bath, that they're able to have this dry area. There's no muck or anything that can potentially contaminate the feet, and they can stand in that and let the solution to just be doing all its disinfecting work for the last 20 minutes actually reach its full potential by allowing it to dry into the foot and then having its maximum benefit. So what that does is by standing it, the zinc or copper sulfate for the prolonged period of time, it can actually disinfect or kill a lot of that bacteria that's on the feet. And you can have two things from that. It can actually prevent cases that the bacteria could be in high concentration, the microabrasion could be there. You mightn't have seen the case of scald yet. It can prevent that from happening. Or in the case where we do have a scald, mild scald, it can actually have cure that as well.
So it is readily treatable. And I take your point there on the batch. Some will sometimes, Jake, maybe go topical treatments on a few individual ones. Could be missing some of them are just showing the physical signs of it, though.
Yeah, exactly. You could be missing that, and maybe one place for a topical treatment is look if you have a lamb that's very severely lame, it's if it's not holding its foot in the air, look, it's not going to put its foot down into the foot bath. So if you can possibly draft it off for a topical treatment there, that's probably for the best.
To go back to another point you made, if we get in, we treat early, we batch treat it, we do reduce the level of challenge as well. Is that a fair point?
You do, yeah. The quicker you can get in, the greater opportunity you have of getting in with those cases are less severe and easier treated. So, say if we can all be guilty of it. If we delay the treatment by a week or two, we're giving that a chance to progress. We're giving it a chance to spread, and next thing we have that we'll say the potential for lameness spread throughout the whole farm. So, like scald. What we didn't know maybe a couple of years ago was scald and foot rot are actually probably they're the same disease, but scald is just an earlier presentation of it. So, look, if you delay it, you're increasing the chances of scald progressing to foot rot, which then is going to be it's a harder disease to treat. It's going to require a more intensive treatment option. And then again, what we know now from recent research that's been done over in the UK is that scald and foot rot also, if cod, the bacteria that causes cod, or if cod itself is present in your farm, can link in then as well. So if we delay that treatment, we can move from one to the other. So we can move from scald, then on to foot rot. Then if we're still delaying treatment and the foot rot is allowed to progress, then potentially you can lead to cases of cod in your farm if that bacteria is there, or even we can see right from it if scald is left to progress, it can actually just turn into cod as well and skip the whole foot rot cycle. So really, you're turning into a very vicious cycle of lameness, or you're turning into very severe types of lameness that require very intensive treatment options there by delaying that. So the quicker you can get in, the less potential that has to progress, and the easier probably is going to be for you to cure, treat, and prevent.
So we think about where we are at this stage of season. We're in the early part at the moment. Important phase for growth for lambs, is all the things you indicated earlier. If we can kind of stem some of this and nip it in the bud at this stage, we do reduce the instance we're going to see of other conditions later in the year.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, the next few weeks are kind of vital to the bird and lameness poses on your farm in the next couple of weeks, throughout the year, I should say. So, if you can get in there early, you're doing yourself a service in the fact that, look, we all know how hard it is to treat cases of lameness. We know how long it can take. It can take time, but by doing that, you're saving yourself both time in the future in the rest for the rest of the season and money in the sense that you're reducing the potential impact that can have in reduced growth rates, look the impact on Yo's body condition score right the way to the Yo's ability to be able to rear lamb.
When we are just talking about that, to be remiss, we're focused a lot on lambs and skull. We're also going to see ewes coming in. There'll be different types of lameness presented. In some cases, they may not have been back through the yard since turnout. Lately, out in some cases, they won't. It's the first dose. Maybe they'll see them again. Jake, in the more severe cases, there may be a need for antibiotic treatment to treat some of those causes. How important will it be to talk to your vet beforehand if there is a couple of cases there that when they are in, that you try to get in a nearly pint, like with the lambs we mentioned, and actually treat some of those cases now?
Yeah, exactly, Kieran. Now, one thing I might say before that is to be able to identify the type of lameness you're dealing with is probably the most important thing you can do on your farm. So just going in there and turning over a few ewes, inspecting the hooves, and if you were in doubt, or if you think that normally what did normally resolve your lameness problems on farm is not, it's a great time to go in then and get advice from your vet and get assistance maybe in drawing up some kind of a health plan where you can kind of reduce your level of lameness on farm. So look, if you've seen an uptake in lameness on farm and you're still doing your same treatment and control options and prevention, maybe it's time to talk to a vet and get advice there about maybe there's a different type of lameness you could be dealing with on your farm, how best to treat and control that. So as well, look for those more severe cases as well, especially cod. We know that that foot bath probably isn't going to be effective in treating it, so we do need to go up a step on the ladder with an antimicrobial treatment and talk to your vet about that. It's best.
Jake, I think that's very important. And the identification piece is key to that because, as you just indicated there, foot batten alone is not going to be effective for some of those, particularly even in the case where some of them sheep are yielding, they won't put it into it. Look, I think that's a useful update. And if I had to take maybe just the one point about it, if you can keep that board on a very low level at the moment, and maybe it might be no harm indicate what the target should be, that does have a massive impact on your overall control on the farm.
Yeah, exactly, Kieran. So look, when we're talking about lameness in a farm, we're trying to aim for ideally a figure of 5% or less. So that's 5 sheep per 100 or less lame. Again, exactly. If you see that if you're constantly kind of getting over that level, or you notice a good few lame sheep in your fields, it might be time to just maybe get a bit of advice from a vet or your advisor about how best to deal with that. But look, it's not something that's very hard to deal with. Look, we have some experience from the better farms where there's been some farmers with had to have had lameness issues, and where they've got in on top of it, being able to identify the treatment or being able to identify the disease they had and actually go in and come up with an effective treatment strategy. They were able to really reduce the proportion of sheep they had lame, and they saw the benefits of that then straight away afterwards.
Jake, great having you on again. Appreciate it. And I think that's a useful update for our listeners today.
Thanks for having me, Kieran.
That's it for this episode. Very useful update from Jake. And again, it's an issue we see on farms at the moment. If to take one thing from it, as Jake has indicated several times, we need to break that cycle early on farms. So putting in that bit of effort now will pay dividends for the rest of the year. That's it for me for Updates Summer Sheep Programme. Keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.